Hey guys, sorry about that.
Round two.
Round two, we're back. We're back.
Fight!
Okay, hopefully you guys will start coming back in. We'll give some guys, some people some time to check back in.
Shout out Racket Man.
Racket Man. This week's Courtside with Beilinson Tennis segment is brought to you by the Racket Man, the industry leader in racket stringing, racket repair, and customization. Go to www.theracketman.net for more info. All right, we're going to wait a second. We're going to take a little drink. Water, we had some people in. We're going to need some water for tonight. Yeah.
All right.
Okay. Like I said, is that giving away something right there?
No, not at all.
That's not giving away something?
I just wanted to see what I was drinking. It was purified water. I don't know what you're giving me.
Okay. All right, as we said, when we talk Rafa versus Roger, I was about to go at it alone. It's so close. So close. I have with me my guest, Will Colmar. He's been on before. Last time you recognized him eating pizza, I believe.
Was very hungry.
Was hungry. We got him water this time.
Right.
So this was
a
last-minute guest. Thank you for coming in.
Absolutely.
This
is one of my favorite debates of all time. Anything.
Will versus David? Or Rafa versus Roger?
Rafa versus Roger.
Okay, fair enough.
No, not Will versus David. No contest.
Okay. I agree. Will's the champ on that one. Okay, quick few shout-outs. Last Thursday night, I did the podcast episode with Caroline Lilly, KU assistant coach. It's alma mater. They're doing great things. It's on iTunes. I also put the SoundCloud link on it. Go check it out when you can. Also, shout-out, did a project that I wouldn't say is typically something I would pick out to do. It was a family-type event. It's a place called Board and Brush. It was in Evanston. There's also one in Downers Grove. It's something you and your fiance and a couple other couples can go do. Yeah, go behind you. Take that. Go get that thing behind you. Show the fans what it is. Will's gonna get it. Yeah. Lift that up. Show that to people. There you go. It's a little.
It's reversed.
It's reversed. We had to adjust with the camera.
Don't worry, the spelling is correct. It's not.
You could do signs for the house. I did a Courtside with Beilinson deal. It's pretty cool to do with the family. Go check it out. The staff is very nice. The owner, Drew, you'd love him. He's your type of guy.
Nice.
So, okay, we got the shout-outs done. French Open, ladies, congrats. Well-deserved, Simona Halep.
Yeah, she did a great job. She played her guts out and came back from a set down and really put her foot to the pedal and got it done against a solid Sloane Stephens, in my opinion. I think she's turning into a very good player. I think she might still need a little bit more kind of firepower behind her game, but she's definitely cemented herself in the women's tour.
Yeah, I would agree. So, a couple things. Simona Halep has had some brutal Grand Slam final losses, so we were happy to see her. As far as Sloane, she had her chances. She was up a set in 4-4 in the second, and it was 30-30 on Halep's serve. Mm-hmm. And Sloane played those 2 points very, very tentatively. And at this level, obviously, a level in any sport, as you go up, you got to take it. You're not going to hope for misses. You know, in recreational style, sometimes it's saying, hey, you know what, your opponent can't hit more than 3 balls in the court. Just wait it out. But at this level, you got to go get it.
Yeah, I think she was kind of relying on, and that's been kind of one of her tactics in the long term, is kind of outlasting her opponents and being very diligent about getting deeper into points. But when you play somebody who's got that kind of firepower, that's a dangerous game to play, and you're really just kind of banking on them not seizing the opportunity, and Halep did. She seized it.
I hear you. I'm trying to get someone who was on earlier before we had some problems, so I want to make sure he gets back on. So give me 1 second, and then we will get going again. Okay, 11 French Opens, dude. At the men's side.
Undecima.
That to me. You never want to say never, but I'm telling you, if a person is born today and they live 100 years, this 11 will not be broken. This 11 French Opens will not, and he's not done. He may get a 12, 13, 14. Healthy, if he's healthy.
Look, I 100% agree. There's not a doubt in my head that he's still the most dominant player on clay, obviously. The question is how long and how many more.
Right. And one of my friends, he said he's like a boa constrictor. He's got you, and he squeezes, and
Yep.
he squeezes, and he squeezes, and he just squeezes the life out of you.
I'll tell you something really interesting, though. And this is, for me, it is clear as day to me. When he plays in those very humid or wet conditions, it starts raining, he is definitely vulnerable. I mean,
that was the match where he lost in one set.
Yeah, you saw that happen against Diego Schwartzman, of all players. That's
shorter than me.
I wouldn't have expected. I mean, that matchup to me, just screams Rafa all day. And Schwartzman had the conditions going in his favor, I think, for quite a while. Obviously, kind of sucked for him that it got postponed and stopped ultimately. And then, of course, when it got dry out, Nadal just absolutely demolished him. But you see what happens with that. And look, every 12 or 13, 14 years, you're probably going to have a couple of those days. And if somebody catches, Nadal, I think they could beat him. It was kind of the same case, I suppose, when Soderling beat him, although there was an injury also. And I do remember wet conditions against Djokovic as well.
2015.
Yep.
Yeah. No, that's something to look at. That's something that their opponents are going to hope for, I guess, because right now, again, to me, this is a record that won't get broken.
No, it's incredible.
So I want to kind of talk about people, tell you all the time, I want Rafa, I'll give you the field. That, to me, is the biggest misnomer, and I'll tell you why. Rafa doesn't have to beat 127 guys in a Grand Slam. He just has to beat 7. And realistically, of those 7, maybe 2 or 3 could play with him, and that's even in doubt.
Yeah.
So it's not like golf, where you have to score the lowest round over a period of 4 days over the entire field. So when they say, oh, you get the field, I get Rafa, that's not really true. You're only getting 7 guys. And again, realistically, of those 7, how many could even test him? So just want to make that point. It's an obvious point, but I always hear, oh, just take the field. I just want Rafa. And I'm like, that's not accurate.
No.
That's not accurate.
No way.
Right.
I'll take the field in 5 years. I'll take 5 years of fields against Nadal.
That's more accurate. That's a really good point. I never even thought about it like that. I mean, that's a really good.
It's otherwise it does not make sense.
The other thing is, and I was talking to my friend, I'll give him credit. His name is Kevin Romer. He does a lot of sports in the Kansas City area, and he's very knowledgeable with tennis. He said, especially on clay, Rafa differentiates himself so much from everybody else. So, like, you look at LeBron in the NBA, you can say he's the greatest. You should have Kevin Durant. You have a few guys where the difference is like this, maybe, right? On clay, you have Rafa up here, and then the next best player in the world is so far, it's off the screen. You can't even see the second hand, okay?
Who's the next best player?
I mean, right now, I'm liking team.
Yeah,
Sasha.
I think I have
Sasha
to go
and team,
too.
but Sasha was just gassed when he played teams. He had so many 5-setters. But that, to me, is what's incredible. You're talking about the best players in the world, and the difference, again, on clay court is so drastic.
It's an entirely different game, and everybody, even after what is this Nadal's 14th year on tour,
something like that.
He's
won 13. He won 11 titles, 13 years.
Yeah,
so
13 years. Everybody's still playing catch up to him. I mean that's what's absolutely nuts is that you haven't seen that level of dominance on the tour from anybody, and that's one of the hallmarks of greatness, in my opinion, for a lot of these tennis players is it's one thing to assert dominance at one point in time. It's another thing to have that over the entirety of your career, and the Rafa's clay court dominance is the single greatest dominance probably in sport, to be honest.
Thank you guys all for checking in. A guy you know very well, Miguel Perez.
Up,
he's been recuperating for ACL, but he's getting better. Brian Big Red Jordan, great pictures that you've been posting on Instagram. Thank you for checking in. He's a Monmouth College coach over there. So all you guys, thanks for checking in. Okay, so now that we hit on the French Open, the ladies, the men, the clay court season is now over, and we can focus now on grass. And there's a certain guy who's been coming back, who's coming back on tour. We missed him for a little bit. I don't know. I think his name is Roger Federer.
He hasn't been playing for so long, so I don't even know. Who is it?
It's these dudes, all right? It's Rafa and Roger, okay? So here's the main event. All right, this is the main event. I want to read a quote, and this is in the newest edition of Tennis Magazine from Ted Robinson, and when he says John, he's citing to John McEnroe. And he's talking about the 2008 Wimbledon match, perhaps the greatest tennis match ever. Said it was the greatest sporting event I've had the privilege of being a part of. But when it was over, it was about 9:30 p.m., and after all that excitement, you have to let it all drop. There's no hanging around because the tournament is over. When John and I got back to the hotel, the bar was closing, but we got them to stay open. I went up to my room, dropped my stuff off. When I was in there, I got a call from John. He said, "Come over to my room." I walked in, and he gave me a beer. We each cracked one and sat down for a few minutes. We needed to decompress. We were quiet, and then John looked at me and shook his head and said, "We'll never see anything like that again. We'll never see anything like that again." I think that was a great, great quote by Ted Robinson. That match arguably is the greatest match ever.
I think it's the single greatest match ever. I think in their rivalry, it's that one and then the Australian Open from last year.
Yep.
This year, last
2009
year.
Australian Open was very, very good. You're talking 2017.
I'm talking 17, and it was just in terms of watching how well they can play at their peak performance and sustain that level. I think both of those matches were if you measured it by a bunch of metrics, probably their highest. I mean, those were the two matches that stand out in my mind, and I still cannot believe Federer pulled that Houdini act in Australian, but to his credit, he played just out of his skull in that fifth set.
Yep, he was down 3-1, I think.
Yep.
So, okay, so here's the deal, all right? Will knew that I was going to be doing this episode. He literally got to my house at 8:25. So we have not really prepped for what we're about to talk about, which is good. I've been
prepping for years.
I don't exactly know his views on a couple things. He doesn't know exactly my views on a couple things, which I think is good, because especially for a debate like this where it's so close. And when we talk about Roger versus Rafa, from my perspective, this is not someone that I have a specific bias for. I love them both. I don't have one favorite player. I don't love Roger more than Rafa. I don't love Rafa more than Roger. This is no MJ versus LeBron debate coming from a Chicago guy. I know MJ is my guy, all right? This isn't like that. So I want everybody to take a deep breath. I know people are passionate about this topic, which they should be. That's what's great about the sport of tennis. That's what's great about these two guys. So I'm going to run.
I do have a bias. I'm just going to throw it out there. I won't tell you until the end, but I do.
Well, I know who you're a fan of more. You could say it now. It doesn't.
I am a diehard Nadal fan. Love him. So we're going to have to just. That's the starting point here.
Okay, I don't have a bias. I love them both. He is leaning more towards being a Rafael Nadal fan. That being said, I mean, Will is smart and knowledgeable enough to let's talk about the stats and let's talk a little bit. We got to dive deep a little into these stats because the stats can be very misleading.
Yeah.
And we'll talk about that. So I'm going to start mentioning a few things, and we're going to chime in when we think a few of those stats are maybe skewed towards one player, unfair towards the other.
Absolutely.
So first off, when you talk about Grand Slams alone, we all know Roger has 20 and Rafa has 17. When we talk about age, Roger is 36 right now. He's almost 37. Rafa just turned 32. So you have about a 5-year difference there.
Yep.
Okay, now let's kind of talk about the sweet spots for both, right? Rafa, 11 French Open titles. We've already talked about it previously. To me, that record will, I'm not going to say never, but in 100 years, if someone's born today, that record's not being broken. Roger, 8 Wimbledons. Now, Sampras had 7.
Yeah.
And we didn't know if that would be broke. Roger beat.
A lot of people said that one wasn't going down.
And Roger broke that.
Yeah.
And Roger, in a couple weeks, he may be adding to this 8 number. Okay? Now, let's look at their worst against the other opponent's best. So, by example, Rafa at Wimbledon has 2 Wimbledons, including beating Roger once.
Yes.
Roger at the French has 1 French, but never beat Rafa.
Never. Won't ever.
Won't ever.
Not
hasn't and not going to happen. And he didn't take him to 5 sets either in any of those matches.
No.
So,
in fact,
Roger will have his French Open.
He had one of the worst beatings in a final history.
Brutal. I think it was like 1-2-0, 1-3-0.
Okay. That was bad.
So we've hit the French Open, we've hit the Wimbledons, both sides of it. Now, Australian Open, this to me, when I looked at this, was very surprising. Roger has 6 Australian Open titles.
Yep.
Rafa only has 1. But when you go head-to-head, Rafa actually leads 3-1. There were some semifinal matches in there. So that, to me, kind of, it's just weird. You have Roger with 5 more Australian Opens than Rafa, but when you go head-to-head, Rafa has a 3-1 lead.
I think he got 2 of those. He beat Safin and he beat Baghdadis both before Nadal was really
making
on the
his
scene.
move.
Yep, and
fair enough.
And so I think he got 2 of the Australians without. Now he did beat him in the finals of that 17 one. Yep. Amazing performance, but. But yeah, that's a weird one too. Just and especially when you toss in, was Djokovic have 6 of them,
right? So
like he was stuffing either one of them at a certain point in the either semis or finals.
I got you.
So yeah, the Australian that's kind of a weird one. It's a
weird one when you look at both,
and especially since I think in a few of those instances they had actually sped the surface of the Australian up, and it kind of. You'd think would benefit Federer,
right?
A lot more so than Nadal, and Nadal was able to either hang with him or beat him in those conditions.
Right. Now, when we go to the last one, the U.S. Open, they've never met, which is shocking to me in any round at that tournament. But as far as titles, Roger has 5 U.S. Open, and Rafa has 3 U.S. Open titles.
Yeah.
So, okay, now when you look at the majors head to head. We're going to say a stat here, but we got to kind of explain this a little bit. So the majors head-to-head, Rafa leads 9-3. But that's skewed towards Rafa's favor, and I say that because Roger was good enough at the French to make those finals. Okay? Now, Rafa's 5-0 against Fed at the French Open.
Right.
Again, Fed made 5 finals.
Sure.
Okay?
He was the second best clay court player.
For a period of time.
Maybe. You could probably say of all time.
Yep.
You probably could.
Maybe. Now, when you look at Wimbledon, Rafa is 1-2 versus Fed at Wimbledon. Okay? Mm-hmm. Now, that's not... That again, I think, to me, is unfair to Fed because... Fed has how many Wimbledon titles, man? Fed has 8 Wimbledon titles. Yeah. If Rafa was good enough on grass to keep getting to the finals, we don't know. Maybe that would be 4-4, or maybe it could be 7-1 Federer. And that shifts the tone a little bit.
Sure.
So these stats, again, we were talking very, very briefly before I hit the live button. It's not like boxing where you and I are going to face each other 10 different times on 10 different surfaces, and it's just you versus me.
Right.
There's other players out there, shockingly, on the tour. And that's why these stats get a little bit skewed. We've already talked about the weird one in Australia where Roger has 6 Australians, but yet Rafa leads 3-1 head-to-head. That's the weird one for me. So, overall, Rafael Nadal leads Roger 23-15. Okay? Head-to-head, they played 38 times. Rafa is 13-2 on clay. Okay, let's take those out. Roger is 11-9 against him on hard courts, and on grass 2-1. So if you don't take clay, Fed leads 13-10.
Yep.
Closer, much closer.
Yeah, I mean,
Again, I think this stat, this 23-15, the stat is skewed towards Rafa's favor because one, there's more clay court tournaments. So when Roger was playing, when Fed was playing, there was more opportunity for Fed to get to the final and meet Rafael Nadal, whether it's at the French or the Italian, whatever.
Yeah.
Grass, there's very few tournaments. And Rafa was not getting to the finals as many times as Roger was winning those 8 Wimbledon titles.
Sure.
So that's why you have to factor that in when you look at these stats. You can't just strictly go by the numbers.
Well, I'll say this on top of that, and that's... Federer didn't know what he was getting into necessarily when he was playing all those clay court matches. He I think in his right mind, believed that he was as good as Nadal, and if not better, and that's something to take into account, is that we can look at this in retrospect and say, well, obviously, Nadal, playing Federer on clay, it's not really fair, but Federer never, can almost guarantee, he didn't go into those matches thinking, the first few times he played him, he probably got a sense, man, this is going to be tough. He probably had no idea he was going to get dominated like that, or that he couldn't figure out a way to counter this attack. So, I don't really buy the argument that if you're a Federer fan, that we have to almost disclude some of those in order to solidify his status as the greatest player. He didn't go into those matches thinking that he was going to get dominated.
Absolutely.
And he absolutely got tasseled. So, is it his fault that they met more times on clay? No, it's not. He was a great clay court player. But now you see what this is kind of transformed into now, is him almost kind of dodging Nadal intentionally. I would say, look, I got a couple little kind of references to Federer saying that some of the most damaging experiences that he's ever had, and I love this being a Nadal fan, of course, was his losses to Nadal at the 2008 French Open, which affected him, he said, in his first couple sets.
That was the brutal one.
2008, yeah, that was really bad.
That was the brutal one.
1-3-0, and then his early defeats against Nadal and clay that he said had long-lasting mental effects on him in his matches.
That's what he does to you. That's what Nadal does to you.
But look, that's part of the game, and Federer, at the time, I don't think he could afford for his legacy to shy away from playing clay altogether. And of course, now he has an exemption, so he can choose to schedule however he likes. But that's why I don't think that you can't really disclude that. You have to say that is what it is, and he just got dominated on clay.
Right.
Good split on hardened grass, but
the grass that's the thing that is, if you're a Fed fan, you have the strongest argument that even though it's only 2-1, that's not Federer's fault. Federer has 8 Wimbledon titles.
Right.
Rafa should have, if Rafa was really, really that great, he would be getting to the finals of Wimbledon like Fed was doing on the clay.
Maybe, maybe not. I mean, here's another weird one. How about their U.S. Open appearances?
Well, they haven't played yet at all. It's just crazy to me.
They've never played, and you would argue that two of the best players of all time.
This is from Brian. He says Rafa is the king of clay, but off the clay, it's huge in Roger's favor, in my opinion. And I think you have to look at more than head-to-head. You have to play a full draw tournament, so it can't just be a head-to-head match. Take away their best tourneys. So classy for Rafa and grass for Fed. Roger has 2 times the slams that Rafa has. I think I can't read all of that right now, but the head-to-head the head-to-head is 23-15 Rafa. If you take out the clay courts, it's 13-10 Roger. It's close. It's not. It's not like Roger runs away with it.
I'll say to Brian's point, right? Scrap the head-to-head. Look at the tournaments. Look at all they've done, and I think it's 9 total titles. I think Federer's got 96 to Nadal's maybe 70.
I'll trust you on
76 or 78.
Okay.
So he's got about 20 more total titles, but Nadal has more ATP thousands Masters, which in my opinion are the next step down from the slams. Look, I get the argument for the ATP finals, which I believe I believe Federer's got 6 or something, maybe 7 to Nadal's.
I want to kind of focus on. I get Brian's point, but when you say we can't just focus on head-to-head, this conversation and this debate is a head-to-head.
It is. Well, it has to have some relevance. But he's right. You have to go through an entire tournament, and guess what? It's not like there aren't other players out there that haven't challenged.
Right, but
I was going to toss this in. I hate to throw this in there. I've actually kind of looked at a bunch of other studies, and I wish I had the stats in front of me. But there are a good amount of kind of quantitative studies that suggest that at their peak performance, the best player that's actually ever played the game is neither of these two. It's Novak Djokovic.
Yeah, let's not throw him.
We're
into
not going to get crazy
equation.
with that. But what I'm saying is that when we're talking about like being the greatest player of all time, sure, it doesn't always have to be just a head-to-head comparison. There are other guys out there that may make a case for this, and it's hard to factor all of this stuff in, but when we look at these two exclusively, that's got to have a lot of weight. Okay, so we've talked about this for a while. You've heard the stats. We've gone inside the stats because, again, I've said it so many times, but I have to emphasize it. If you look at the numbers alone, that doesn't tell the whole story because you have to have these guys playing each other. To me, I mean, it's so close. And a big factor, and I did this last year, and I got some interesting comments on it. To me, if Rafa's healthy in 2009, Federer is still seeking a French Open. Oh, yeah.
He hasn't proven that he can come close to beating him at Roland Garros. I know he has beaten him on clay in other tournaments. But Roger is incredibly fortunate that Rafa was hurt in 2009, and Rafa did play the tournament. He lost to Robin Soderling. In 2015, the other year where Rafa didn't make it, Roger didn't win that one either. He lost to Stan Wawrinka, and Stan won it. So there was another year, another opportunity to Roger to add a second one, which still he would not have beaten Rafa, but maybe two would have even pushed him over more for the Fed fans to say, okay, now he's got two French titles. I know he hasn't beaten Rafa at Roland Garros, but he's got two.
Sure.
All right? Here's my thing, right? God, is it close. Okay. Fed will never beat Rafa in Roland Garros. It's not going to. He hasn't, and he's not. We've agreed on that. Rafa beat Roger on grass, and I know Rafa's only gotten to the finals a few enough times. They only played 3 times, and maybe it would have been 7-1 Fed, but it's not, and we don't know. Maybe it would have been, 5-2 or whatever it is, 5-3.
Can't postulate too much on
5-3, 4-4. We don't know. You give your call, and I'll give my call.
All right. Again, die-hard Nadal fan. I'll preface this.
And this is today, by the way. This story, the beautiful thing about this is this saga is going to continue.
If both of these guys retired tomorrow, and you had to, and like, I die and go to heaven, and God asks me, well, who do you think was better? And God knows the answer, and I don't. And I had to, for my soul, say to God, who I thought God thought was better, I'm going to go with Federer. And the only reason is because when I look at everything that he's compiled, all the tournaments, 96 tournaments, titles, 20 Grand Slams. I mean, I don't know if they won 20 matches in a year in college. I mean, that's just, it's an absurd number. 17 is, by the way, too. The 308, I think it's 308 weeks at number 1. Again, I understand that's not happening at a time where Nadal wasn't there to contest that. A lot of this stuff it just happened at a weird time in tennis where I think there was a little bit of a gap when Federer started.
Right.
But you can't say, look, it means any less when you look at all of the accolades.
Right.
When you look at everything that he's accomplished, I have to give the very, very slight edge to Federer. Now, I put that with an asterisk because, in my mind, if I went up to Federer and I go, Federer, you're the greatest player of all time, I think he would have a little bit of a problem with that, and I think anybody would when they know in the times where it's mattered most, the things that they've wanted to accomplish the most, and they've been facing another guy, and they look over to the net and they see this guy who's just going to take it straight from him, straight away from him. I would have a lot of trouble accepting that as a player and saying that I am, in fact, the greatest of all time when I know that there's been that guy, some guy lurking in the shadows, absolutely ready to rip my heart out. And Nadal's done it time and again. So I think when you talk about that, it doesn't make sense to say that Federer is the greatest of all time without saying, okay, well, there's a little bit of a problem here. Whereas, I think at the end of the day, if Nadal gets some of these accolades back, you can't say that the same way. You will never be able to say that the same way. Nadal will have a clear and out edge.
And that's what Brian is kind of saying. It'll be interesting to see how we feel if Nadal can play this level for another 5 years after Fed hangs up. So right now, today, you're giving the slightest of all slightest margins to Roger.
But at the end of the day, Nadal fan.
But at the end of the day, you think if Rafa can stay healthy when they're both done,
not a doubt in my mind. Even if he gets within one slam. And maybe 30 or 40 weeks of number one, 5 less titles overall. I think it's Nadal. I think it's clear and out Nadal.
All right. So Fed today, Nadal when it's all done.
Absolutely.
Okay. As far as my thought, here are the big things. Okay. Fed's not going to beat Rafa on clay. At Roland Garros. I'm sorry. Fed's not going to beat Rafa on Roland Garros. He hasn't done it in the past, and he's not going to do it now. Roger was incredibly fortunate, and obviously in 2009. In 2008, and arguably the greatest tennis match ever, Rafa beat Fed on Fed's best surface.
Yep.
That weighs heavily to me. Now, again, the head-to-head is so skewed, 23-15, and a lot more is on clay. There's more clay court tournaments than grass court tournaments. I get it. But if you take away all the clay court matches, and you really... That's not fair to take away all of them, but let's say you do. There's only a 3-match difference. It's 13-10 Fed. That's not dominating to me at all. And because of that, and, I know people get passionate about this. I'll say this. I love both of them, and I respect the hell out of both of them, and I can't wait to keep seeing them play for at least a couple more years. Knock on wood.
Hey.
My pick today, who is the better player? By the slightest margins, the greatest player of all time.
Oh, no.
Fix the water bottle a little bit, make that just right. Rafael Nadal.
Oh,
and with that, folks, I'm taking a vacation. I'm taking next week off. Thank you, Will, for this discussion. This was awesome. Good night, everybody.
All right. No playoff.